Ooh, they're having a bit of fun.
There is an unhinged amount of ham radio handhelds on the market, from $18 all the way above $700. And the proliferation of these cheap Chinese radios has led to duplications of similar types of radios from different companies that behave similar in certain ways but different in others. And then you have the major companies like Kenwood, ICOM, and Yaesu that kind of do things their own way. I realized that I've been trying to teach you how to operate a radio instead of give you the tools necessary to figure out how to operate any radio. By the way, hi, I'm Josh, KI6NAZ. Welcome to the Ham Radio Crash Course. Today I'm going to show you how to use just about any ham radio handheld to do some of the most common things that you need to do when picking up a radio for the first time. And just because you are not new to something like a Baofeng doesn't mean it won't be helpful if you find yourself with a more expensive radio or a radio that's still inexpensive but from a different company. Let's go over to the tabletop and I'll walk you through what I think some of the best tips and practical knowledge things you need to know how to operate a handheld ham radio.
The ham radio handheld. It's kind of like a thing that you buy one, possibly like this $18 Baofeng, and it almost feels like it's a pox that you get afflicted with, and then you end up with more and more and more, including some really expensive high dollar numbers, right? But they all have their own kind of way of operating, even ones that have similar operating structures, like the Baofeng versus the Quancheng, and even the Wushan to a point. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the Baofeng, I think, is kind of the entry point. And yeah, I mean, is that fair to these other better radios? By the way, almost every radio on this table is better than this Baofeng. But this is likely what a lot of you have seen, heard of, and deal with. So I'm going to start with there to create a foundation and then branch out. All right, so starting with our friend the Baofeng here, you're noticing two things right off the bat from the stock version. One, I have an accessory secondary market antenna, a better antenna. This is a Nagoya NA701, and I have the extended battery, which you can see is actually a whole unit there, right? And this, the nice thing about this is that it has the coaxial input so that you can charge this when you are on the go. Because the problem with the Baofengs in their stock format is that they have a battery that requires it to be docked in a cradle, which is never the way you want to go when you're going portable. So already, those are two things that I think everyone should do when they're looking at a radio for the first time, is put on a good secondary antenna and get some good battery options. And yeah, you can buy lots of these to be able to get on the air. But as far as radio use goes, you always want to focus on two major things when it comes to these analog handheld radios, before we even get to digital. Can I get to simplex communication, and can I get to repeaters? So what do those mean? Simplex means this radio is keyed to the same frequency as this radio, meaning if I say 146.580, which happens to be the frequency that we use for a lot of our YouTube Hamfest channels and frequencies, that's the frequency that we're on. So if I transmit on this, you go like, okay, great. It's transmitting walkie-talkie styles, another way to look at it. But when I pull up this radio, which is the Quancheng, so right now I am in frequency mode. And so if I wanted to just type in 146.580, and this is one of the first problems you'll find sometimes, is that I typed in 146.580 and see how it defaulted to 75? And now look, oh my gosh, it's going from 575 to 600. Well, what's that about? So the problem with that is its step size in how it changes frequencies is too big. It's way too big, particularly for ham radio use. So we need to change that. I didn't plan on doing this right off the cuff with another radio, but I think we will. So I'm going to go down to step. See how it says 25 kilohertz? Well, we need to lower that. So we're going to enter into that. And we're going to lower that down to like 5. Fine, that'll work fine. So we'll exit. And now I can go to 580. And if I transmit, yeah. Now we're in walkie-talkie mode. So that was the first thing that you should know how to do, is take radios into simplex. And how you do that on radios like this Baofeng is you hit the VFO MR button. VFO means variable frequency oscillator. It's a fancy way of saying I can type in the frequency that I'm operating on. And we just did this on the Quancheng. He wanted to type in the frequency, but then he was like, nope, I only work in 25 hertz sizes or kilohertz sizes. So I had to go into the menu, which is always a button called menu. Notice that the Baofeng and the Quancheng both have an M button or a menu button. And then I scrolled down to step. So that's the fundamental thing you have to understand when it comes to radios. And let's open this up a little bit and include some other radios, because they function a little bit differently when it comes to talking about simplex communications, radio to radio. And that's what we're trying to do here. Simplex does not mean repeater. It literally means you are transmitting on and receiving on the same frequency, 146.580. So if I key up on this side and I key back on this side, it transfers over. They're talking back and forth to each other, walkie-talkie style. So let's compare our baseline of the Baofeng. You hit this VFO MR button. How do I do that on what I argue is a much better radio, this VX6R? If I hold down the power button to turn it on, I am in memory mode because I'm literally scrolling through different repeaters that may be in my area. So if I wanted to get into VFO mode, then I would hit the V and the M button. Is that a Yaesu thing? Well, we'll find out as we look at some other radios. But now I'm in VFO mode. So if I type in 146.580, if I bring back to my Baofeng, ooh, they're having a bit of fun. So now we're in simplex mode, which is what we were trying to do. And literally, you could spend an entire your entire ham career almost just playing around with this concept of finding a frequency that is not in use in the area you're at and being able to communicate, and then changing out antennas to get a little bit more effective. By the way, this is a signal stick antenna, a little bit of a long boy, but we like these because they wrap up real nice and they can be packed in a backpack. I have links in my video description for these, as well as the same website, Signal Stick, has these BNC connectors, which I say is one of the first upgrades you should do to your radio, to go to a BNC connector. Because the advantage of having a BNC connector is that if you had a field expedient jungle antenna, or sometimes called a J-pole antenna, or a Slim Jim antenna, and yeah, these are different types of antennas, but they have BNC connectors a lot of time for their coax feed line. So this is all feed line, and then this ladder line material you would hoist up in a tree. But once you have this set up, hoisted up really quickly with just a simple line, you can plug into this, and then all of a sudden that is now your antenna if you're camping or whatnot, and you're transmitting into it, right? So the same thing can be said for other radios, right? So this is a Yaesu, and we're going to look for a V and an M something, a VFO or a memory channel. And you can see that even though these buttons are really just a numerical pad, down here is a V and an M button. And if you had a memory storage, this would switch it back and forth. Right, so there's the first thing, is looking at a ton of different radios, you can see that they all have kind of a similar nomenclature for whether something is going to be a V and an M, or it's going to be a VFO or an MR, or it is going to be, or if it's a radio like the Quancheng, I see something that says VFO MR, but it also has the number 3 next to it. And if I hit 3, oh, it's just typing 3. It's not taking me to VFO MR. So that's going to be the next thing that's important, is that some of these radios will have multiple things that the number pad can do. And how you access that information or that setting is going to change depending on the radio. So with the Quancheng, for example, if I hit this F button, which stands for function, and then I hit 3, now I am in channel mode, or the repeater channel memory system. And yeah, you can record channels for simplex as well. If I go back, now I can type in, there's my 146.580, and I can blow up all these radios, right? Some of them will have a function button that you will have to change depending on what it is you're trying to do. So keep that in mind, because you may have all these cool little printouts, but you may not be able to access them because you haven't figured out how to do that. Because if I'm just typing, it's just typing out frequencies now, and it doesn't care what I'm doing. It's not giving me the function of like the band access, the A and B channel, the VFO. So how do you get out of it when you typed in some boneheaded number? I'll just hit the PTT. It usually takes you out. Then you could do band as the one button, and there you go. Now I'm on 10 meters or 28 megahertz. This is a hacked firmware Conchang. So just keep that in mind as well. As look at the faceplate, because that's going to change what your capabilities are as a user, and you should be able to unlock them when you hit an appropriate button or know how to either hold the button down to be able to get access to it. And so if you thought to yourself, well, okay, so I just need to look for the words and the number, and I need to click menu or the F button, and then you're good to go. Not always. Kenwood has always kind of had a record for overloading a lot of the uses of their buttons, and that's not a bad thing, but at the same time, let's take a look at this. You have a number, and then a word above the button, and then a word on the button. And so if I click the button, what is it going to do? Oh, it changed my power output. So the button must have precedence right now. You need to keep that in mind as you're using this radio. If I click the button, now we're in high power. Now we're in low power. So how do I change to go to battery power, for instance? Well, I got to go over here to the F button, click it, and then hit battery, and there's my battery percentage, right? So that's how that works. If, for instance, I wanted to change my mode of operation out of FM, this radio allows you to do that. Hit the F button and then hit band. And now I'm in wide FM, and you can see I'm picking up some errant signal. So let's go ahead and get out of that. I'll see now I did the thing because I didn't click F before I clicked the band button, and now I'm stuck in a loop here. So now I'm in AM on this. I don't want that, so I want FM mode, FM mode, FM mode, FM mode, and now I'm back in FM. Right, so if I want to type in my simplex call frequency that I'm doing with all my friends here on these other radios, I need to click the ANT button for enter. What does that do? Well, it allows me to type in the frequency. So it's 146,580. And now all my radio buddies start chiming up because I'm hitting them. Now you might be getting glassy-eyed from this conversation thinking, why isn't it more like a phone? That's a great question because we've looked at, a couple of different radios here and they're all a bit different. So why don't they behave more the same? And the simple reason is that they're all running different operating systems. The iPhone is using iOS. Your Android phone is using Android. And so these phones will make hardware, buttons, and other capabilities that interfaces with the operating system. And the operating system is the same look and feel that you're expecting, right? So when you open it, you get all the apps and all the other things you want to click on that you'd normally expect. That's not the same with radio. Radio is going to have their own way of doing things. So the next thing that we're going to look at is power output, because this is a really important thing to keep in mind with all of your handhelds. So while you do often need full power out of this radio and into the antenna to make a contact over simplex, you often don't need full power to hit a repeater. Again, depending on where you live. And so they'll have different ways of changing the power output. So let's take a look at the Baofeng as a benchmark. Scroll in here a little bit. If I hit menu, and then I hit TXP for transmit power, we're at high right now. We don't necessarily need high when I'm talking to my bro radios. So I'm going to hit menu, and I'm going to hit one of the up or down arrows to change that to low power, for instance. And I'm going to save it by hitting menu again, and I'm going to get exit to exit out. And so now if I transmit, I'm still hitting all my friends because we're all sitting next to each other and maybe we're not that far away. But if you're on a repeater or trying to talk to a repeater, it's best to lower the power output to its lowest level and then work your way up until you're able to hit the repeater, particularly using a better antenna, than it is to always be transmitting at high power, particularly if you're outdoors. You want to save that battery. This is your depleting resource, much like water that you would have to worry about if you're in the field, or you just have an extended amount of time you want this radio to function. So save your batteries. Go low power. So now we're going to get in the weeds a little bit when it comes to repeaters, but this is very important to understand what's happening here. So we're going to treat these all as users of the repeater, and we could be separated by tens of miles, if not, I don't know, 60 miles. And my little war driver here is going to be my repeater. Let's say it's on a mountaintop. When a radio that wants to talk into the repeater transmits into the repeater, it's not going to transmit on the stated frequency that's on the display, however you have that configured using chirp or whatever. It's going to transmit on an offset frequency, and that offset is going to be slightly off of that receive frequency. And the reason for that is that's what the repeater is listening on. You're going to transmit on that offset frequency, often called the input frequency, and that's going to key up this repeater to then transmit on the receive frequency for the radio or the repeater that you're on, and then all of these radios will hear it. The reason we do that is that you have basically simultaneous transmissions, meaning while you're transmitting onto the input of this radio, which is slightly off frequency, it's simultaneously transmitting out on the receive frequency. You don't hear it because this is a single duplex or half duplex radio. Now just think about this for a second. If you had this radio on a mountaintop, and let's say this is a 100-watt radio, and you're transmitting into it at the same frequency, and it's simultaneously transmitting out on the same frequency, chaos would ensue. They'd all be interfering with each other constantly. So you use something with an offset, transmit in, it transmits out and hits all of these other radios while you're talking and you can't hear yourself because you're not full duplex. Then you can make contact with everybody. That's how repeaters work. And it's more complicated than that, particularly inside the repeater station, but that's the idea. Now, how do we engage this offset where this radio is going to transmit into the repeater and it's going to transmit out? Well, first we got to get off of whatever that is. So let's go into menu, and under item 25 it says shift. Yeah, that's what that says. SFT stands for shift/D, which is shift direction. So if I go to menu, hit menu again, I get a plus or a minus. If I'm on 70 centimeters, it's going to be a 5 megahertz shift, but if I'm on 2 meters, then it's going to be about 600 kilohertz. Now for repeaters, it doesn't really make it easy on you. So if you go back into menu and we go up to 25, we said go up, right? But we didn't say how much to go up. We have to set that. So let's lock that in.
Confirm.
And we'll go to the offset. Oh, there's no offset here. The offset is blank. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 600.
Offset frequency 0, 0, 0, 6, 0, 0. Confirm.
So now when I exit out of here, it's shifting up in frequency. Which if there was a repeater on that location that's listening and it's open, which we'll talk about in a second, it would pick that up and go, oh, somebody's transmitting into me. I need to take that and go ahead and retransmit it. I'm going to go into this box at that up offset frequency and then transmit out to everybody else at that receive frequency. So what is that other thing? Well, there's more to this, of course. The repeaters don't want to just retransmit everything it hears. And so it usually has something called a CTCSS tone that tells it whether to transmit or not transmit. And if you're not transmitting that tone, it will not turn on, which then retransmits out. This is a way that we prevent repeaters from erroneously transmitting errant, unrelated information. So it's only when you transmit in at the appropriate frequency that it transmits out to everybody that's listening on all these other radios. So how do we do that? So every one of these radios has a CTCS transmit function, and this Baofeng is pretty easy to get to. If you go to menu, item 13, transmit for T, CTCS, and if you go into that, you can then provide some kind of a sub-audible hertz or some audible sound that this will transmit on specified information. And if you want to know what the repeater over here is listening for, you have to use something like repeaterbook.com or a number of other resources that tell you what that frequency is. And then once you have that and you have the offset set, you can save the memory channel. And that is what adds to the memory channel, that when you click VFO or memory mode, it's switching between them. Now the good news is that every one of these radios functions with this exact same concept. So imagine you have this Kenwood, which by the way is pretty much discontinued right now, but you can still find them used. Let's say someone said, hey, my repeater is on this frequency, 147.16180, which is not necessarily what it would be. You need to set the offset and you need to set a tone. Keep in mind, this is a bit different than the Baofeng, but watch how easier this is, even though this is very complex. So watch this, hit the tone button. T is now enabled, and if I hit F and then tone again, T cell is the item that's displayed. And I gotta zoom really in because these buttons are kind of small here. But check this out. If I hit F and tone again, now there's my sub-audible tone select, and I can use the dial to change this up or down. So let's say it's 136. Good. Okay, we're gonna hit it again. So now I'm transmitting on that tone, because that T is inactive. So what if I need to now set my frequency shift? So same problem, I hit F, and then shift is a button right there. Oh, a plus showed up. What if I do that again for minus? Now it's minus, and so watch what happens when I transmit. It's shifting down. So now that we have a repeater pretty much lined up here, so we have a frequency set, we have tone selected, and we have an offset which is shifting it up versus down. Now we need to set it to a memory location, and we're going to save it off as repeater. So if we hit the F button, so it says 2, that's the current most active loaded repeater. 3 is a blank channel, and if I hit M.in, it's now saved. So we're in VFO mode. Let's change it to MR. And on 3, there's our repeater that we programmed. So let's get back to 146.520. So I'll hit enter, 146.520. That is our national simplex calling frequency, but I don't want tone on there. So I'll turn that all the way off. It's gone. I'll hit F, and I want that. No, I don't want it on 3 or 4. I want it on my 0 station, so I'll memory in. And I don't want that low power either, so I take that back. Let's go to low, high. We want high for simplex in most cases. That's the way I like to use it. I'll lower the power if I need to change it. But so now we'll hit F again. We'll go down to 0, and we'll hit M in. So now we're on VFO. Let's go to MR, memory. There's our frequency, 146.520, all set. Notice how that is completely different battery of arms than the Baofeng. Totally different. In fact, it's like, I think the Kenwood's actually a lot easier because it's all on the screen. You don't have to go into a menu system like you do with the Baofeng. You just go in by hitting the F button and then whatever it is as printed on the screen. This is a much easier radio to use. So here's another handy feature that a lot of radios have deployed in different ways. So if you take this FX6, it has a button on the side here. If you click it, it's called the monitor. It allows you to hear signals that are way below the squelch level. And so squelch, very important. I'm going to use this as an example because the Kenwood makes it really easy. If I hit SQL, no, this isn't SQL, but if I hit SQL, I can set the squelch down to 0. That means it's just passing everything through. But if I click it on one level, now the squelch is taking that noise floor and it's silencing the radio, and only things that break above the noise floor are getting through. Squelch is really handy, but sometimes you want to just hear what's out there, and so you can hold the monitor button and you can hear it. Radios like the Quansheng actually are kind of like the Yaesu. You button on the side, and now you're hearing the monitor, which is really handy. The Baofeng doesn't really work that way. You have to, that's a flashlight if you don't hold it down, but if you hold it down, now you hear the monitor as well. So keep that in mind, they don't all work the same. Now, something that is my favorite feature that most of these radios don't have is monitoring the reverse frequency. So let's say on our repeater, our make-believe repeater we made here, which is this guy, see this transmit? See how it switches? It goes up by 6 kilohertz. Well, we've got a jammer, and they're transmitting on this repeater. They're transmitting into this frequency. So if I wanted to figure out where they were at, or I wanted to hear if I can hear them on simplex, I want to monitor the input frequency. If you hit the reverse button, now you are listening to the input for that repeater. Not all radios do this. A lot of them have different ways of making it work, but that's a really handy feature to be able to have in your arsenal. Now, for a little bit rarer of radios, what about radios that don't have keypads at all, right? So this is the ICOM ID50, which is a really good radio, and one of my my classic radios here, which is honestly, you can find a Baofeng that looks just like this. This is the Yaesu VX3, which is like a 1-watt transmitting radio. And by the way, take a look at this screen. So look at the screen printing. Now you have a printed button, a orange word, and then a blue word. Well, how do you do all of those things? Those are all things that are either a press and hold, an F and W, and this, and then there's all kinds of variation that you can run into versus something like the ICOM, which is going to have a different approach. Right, so let's take a look at some of these. So I'm on US call, and this is also on simplex. So do they have a memory and VFO mode? Sure, a VM button and an MR button. So if I click that, now I'm looking at the HRO repeater in Anaheim, and if I hit VM, this is just going to take me back to, I think this is VFO. Yeah, it's VFO. Right, so this is my US call. It's one of my transmit frequencies. So slightly different, but same concept. And this dial here on the top, well, that's just one click and it locks. So if I go to US call and I lock it in, now I'm kind of like locked in there. But on the ICOM, that's not how it works at all. It has a crown and an outer dial. And so the crown is your volume control, and then the outer dial allows me to change through the frequencies, or in this case, the memory channels that I have loaded. So if I hit HRO, I'm not going to hit it. What about the next one? Well, none of these repeaters I can hit with my sideways held vertical antenna. Okay, so that's just navigating them. So what if you go back into VFO mode? So for here, two buttons. This is a V or megahertz. So I click it. Now I'm at 146,420, and I can just scroll this up into, I don't know, one of these. It automatically tries to set an offset for me on the plus side, and if I go to V over here, I'm still in 70 centimeter. Let's match them. So I'm going to go back down to band. I'm going to change the band button. Band is changing the frequency set, so 30 megahertz, 108 megahertz, 146. Okay, pretty close. So I'm going to go up to 147.80. There's a faster way of doing this with some button clicks, but I'm just going with what I see here, make it simple. So there we go, 147, 147, and if I transmit, oh, why isn't it? Oh, there's an offset. Oh, and there's an offset here too because it thinks it's a repeater. Interesting. So it's like they both know to plus up the offset, and we can change that if we want to the minus to go down. So how do we set a tone in this case? Because we would want to likely have a tone if we were on a repeater. Now, so if I have tone selected and I don't know what sub-audible kilohertz I'm transmitting on, it's actually kind of easy to do this on the ICOM. I hit quick and I go to TS for tone select, and then I can change this to whatever I want to match the repeater. So let's say 200 kilohertz. So now I have a plus transmit, I have a tone selected, and I want to load it into memory. On some of those other radios, there's going to be a different battery of arms to do that. In this case, though, you just hold the MW button down. So if I hit MR, that's all of our memories we have. If I hit VFO, that's now my VFO frequency. But if I go back and I hold down MW, hold it down, that's the selection. So now it's going to ask me, write a new channel, write to a selected channel, or manage my memory. So let's just make it simple. We're going to go to write new channel and hit the jewel button. And so it's going to say channel 65. I don't want that. I'm going to change it to 60, 70. Let's do that. And I hit OK. Write to a blank channel? Yeah, go ahead. There you go, it's done. So now when I get out of here, I'm back in memory. Let's change this, fine. If I go back to memory mode, now if I go down to the end, there's our new repeater that we've loaded into it on channel 70. That's all there is to it. So what if you have an incredibly complex radio like this Kenwood D75? Yeah, there's a lot of features that are baked into this, but it's not so far off from its older brother in the sense that, look at this keypad. It's pretty similar. In fact, they share some similar buttons. It's changed over time with adding more in the D-pad, and now the enter button, which was down here before, is now here, so I can just type in whatever I want. Right, and now I'm transmitting there. The idea, though, is that you have the same or similar context from radio lines to radio lines, and you have the F button, which gives you this new quick menu, versus you had the F button on the Kenwood that worked a little bit different based off of the keypad. And you can go deeper by going into the menu, which gives you more options that way. But the base rule set is pretty much the same. A lot of this video is really trying to empower you to get some kind of an anchor point that you can base things off of, because all these radios function a little bit differently, and they will have similar characteristics of other radios that don't necessarily match with other ones, but then you have, you know, an oddball one that's going for size versus capabilities of like the Kenwoods that may vary a lot. And that's the point, is that, you know, the takeaway here is that these all vary a little bit, but it's not too unapproachable because the same standard rules apply. I need to set a frequency for whatever I'm going to do. I need to set an offset if I'm going to do a repeater, and I need to have a sub-audible tone for them to be able to talk to the repeater and be able to activate it. And then if I like that repeater and I want to be more engaged with it, I might want to commit it to memory, and they all have a slightly different way of doing it. The good news is that all of this is generally documented pretty well, and if the manual is not satisfying to you, maybe written in a way that you don't jive with it, then you can look up YouTube videos that cover these in greater detail, or you can pull up many websites that cover these to greater extent. So that's the idea, is, you know, just keep an open mind with a lot of these radios. Just know going in that they're all going to work a little bit different, and you may need some kind of a way to be able to remind yourself what that is. For me, you know, I have a notepad that I keep with me all the time, and I like to make notes on things, particularly if I have a continued problem. I want to make a note and possibly laminate a piece of paper that I keep with the radio for things that make me get tripped up when I'm trying to use the radio and how I want to function with it. There is a much deeper rabbit hole that, you know, different radios can go into when we start talking about the accessory ports. By the way, Kenwoods and Baofengs pretty much have the same audio accessory ports here. Even the Quancheng shares that, and some of them have USB-C and some of them don't. They're DC only, but you know, that's what makes your radios unique, is that they're going to be a little bit different across the board, but they will have similarities that you can tie off of to be able to use them in conjunction with each other.
So the only way videos like these can get better is if you take the time to take my tips, try them out, and then you tell me how'd I do. Or if you are experienced with handhelds, what would you have added? Because I'm going to use this as a series that we are going to deploy for things like D-Star radios, Yaesu System Fusion radios, mobile radios like in your car, and of course, high frequency radios, the radios that I like the most, obviously, right? So we'll talk about portable Go Box radios, preparedness-minded radios, bug-out radios, all of that in a practical sense to just give you the tools you need to get up and running. And then you can use my other videos, now well over 1,000, that go deeper into different aspects of things. Want to do JSA call? I got a video for that. Want to do WinLink? I got that too. There's a link in the description to my playlist, which you can find if you're interested in Are You New to Radio? Start here. Click on it, and any one of those things is going to help you get that deeper context to go along with that baseline that we set today. Love to hear your feedback. I mean that truly. I'm Josh KI6NAZ. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. 73.